What is the most embarrassing way your body has betrayed you? I danced classical ballet for years when I was younger. One day, when I was 12, we were doing a stretch where we were lying on our backs with our butts scooted to the wall and our legs stretched towards to the ceiling. We would let our legs fall into the splits, letting gravity to assist us. So we were lying there, listening to quiet piano music, my legs wide open, and the girl next to me was whispering jokes and making me giggle. I could feel the onslaught of explosive gas happening, but being young and stupid, I was afraid to close my legs because I thought I'd get in trouble. So I ripped the loudest, most terrifying fart to ever exist. I think I blew a hole in my little pink leotard, I swear to God. The room was a huge wooden studio, so that fart from hell was bouncing off the walls for like 15 minutes. All the little girls started screaming. I was screaming. The teacher was probably screaming. Still gives me nightmares. I have IBS and get really insanely distended stomach full of gas when I eat certain foods. It looks like there's a basketball under my skin, and it's all gas. My boyfriend of a year or so knew about my IBS, but hadn't really experienced the worst of it. One day, we were hanging out at my apartment, and I had my big gas belly. He knew what that meant, so I excused myself to my room to try and fart some of it out. He decides to come in to show me something on his phone. As I'm laying on my bed with my knees up, trying to coax the gas out, he starts laughing at the sight. I start laughing. I feel an epic release of gas coming, and I try to tell him to leave ASAP, but I'm also laughing. Between the laughter and the position I was in, I couldn't hold it back. I let out the loudest, longest fart in history. At first, he laughed eye surprise, and then as it kept going on, his face changed from laughter to surprise to shock mixed with what looked like a twinge of sadness. Watching him go through so many emotions right on his face just made me laugh harder, so the fart just kept going. After what feels like eternity, he steps out of the room, hands over his mouth. He comes back in and the fart is finishing off with the final toot toot toot. He is speechless. The first thing he says is, "I feel like I lived 80 years, died, and came back to life again before that fart ended. I just don't understand how it was so long and steady." And then it got all Louis Armstrong at the end. And that's how we started calling certain trumpety farts Louis. Also, we moved in together a few months later, so my butt performance didn't deter him too much. 5th grade. Math test. Felt a sneeze coming and tried to hold the sneeze in to maintain the mandated silence. Ended up farting on a wooden seat chair that resonated the sound perfectly. So basically fart. Boner at the psychiatrist. Hit it pretty well, but it was still towards the end of the session. I was sitting on the floor in my cheap wooden condo and let out a huge fart. Dog in the condo below me started barking, and I could hear the cute girl who lived there and her visiting parents laughing. I stood up from sitting at work and screamed in pain because I got a cramp behind my nutsack. I don't know how to explain it, but that's where I felt the pain amount. My coworkers were dying of laughter when I explained what my scream was. In 6th grade, I got a boner for no reason, and then was asked to go hand something to the teacher. When I stood up, this girl that sat near me stared right at my crotch with wide eyes. I'm just thankful she didn't tell anyone, or I might not have heard the end of it. Last summer, I tripped over something while walking on the sidewalk. Happens every now and then, no big deal. It normally just looks like a funny skip or something. Except this time, a Kindorf leaped forward into the air, and somehow, the normal response message to put my hands before me didn't reach its destination, so I just dropped into the ground like a human sack of potatoes. It was about equally painful and embarrassing. Still don't know how that happened. 2 hours train ride. I felt the air coming slowly, but I held it back until the end. Finally, the next stop was mine, so I stood up and walked to the door, still holding back that, now massive, amount of air in my colon. Just when the doors were about to open, some child stumbled into me from behind. It surprised me so much that I, just for a moment, didn't hold in. The result was the loudest, most disgusting fart you could ever imagine. I never left the train station faster in my entire life. In a meeting with my managers, they're complaining about X, Y, and Z that I haven't achieved. I'm not upset about the criticisms, if anything, I'm angry. I have to hear them. But for some bizarre reason my eyes started watering. We'd have these meetings weekly, and every time, my eyes would water and tears would pour. It started just happening when I wasn't even angry. And even in normal angry situations, I'd never tear up. Just in those meetings. Farted the most rancid fart of death in 6th grade. Teacher somehow knew it was me, and kicked me out of class, told me to go to the nurse and have someone pick me up because she was convinced I had to be sick to produce such a toxic stench. I thought it was cool. I got to get out of school though, and my dad thought it was hilarious. I peed myself in class. I was wearing a skirt and no tights. I was 17. It was my first year of college, and the lecture lasted for hours. I held it as long as I possibly could, until at some point, I was 100% certain I would pee myself as soon as I stood up. I couldn't excuse myself to the bathroom because I'd pee myself on the way in front of everybody. So I stayed. I waited until the other students left, but they didn't. Of course, they had questions for the professor. Some lingered. I got out, made it out of the classroom miraculously. Then, as soon as I was out the door, I couldn't hold it anymore. I kneeled down on the floor, pretended to look for something in my bag. Someone even asked if I was okay, hoping against all hope that no one would notice the puddle at my feet. I kept pretending to look in my bag for 5 more minutes until everyone was gone, then walked to the nearest bathroom to dry myself as best I could. Then I went home, changed my underwear and dried my skirt and shoes with the hairdryer, because it would look suspicious if I came back with different clothes. No one ever mentioned it. To this day, I wonder if some did see it and avoid talking about it to spare me the embarrassment, or if I somehow managed to hide it. Story time. My grandmother was killed when she received the AIDS virus through a blood transfusion back in the day. If you live in Minnesota and get a blood transfusion, know that my grandma was the one that ate the bullet that makes hospitals screen blood. My family donates blood on her birthday. I hate donating blood. I hate needles. I hate seeing blood. And I hate the weird cold feeling you get throughout your entire arm. In a terrible twist of fate, I happen to have universal blood that is CMV negative. I can donate to babies and small children, which apparently is rare. Hospitals are always in short supply, it seems, as I am always getting calls to donate a double amount every time I'm eligible. I charge them twice as many cookies as they give other people. One time, after giving a double dose, I was feeling just fine. I usually feel wiped out and need to go to sleep, but that day I was feeling fine. I got home and the wife was there, and we're trying to have a kid. And we were both kind of flirty, so we went for it. I got in the buff when my knees wobbled, the room spun, and I just collapsed on the floor. I never lost consciousness. I was just sprawled naked on the floor, unable to lift my arms or legs. I could loll my head about. When I was in high school, by starting a period without any of the usual symptoms and leaving a bloody puddle on the chair and huge stain on my jeans. Anytime I've finished peeing and get zipped up and a little more pee dribbles out and leaves a little wet pee spot on my pants. Went to pick up a pencil while sitting at my school desk, around 7th grade. Loud fart rips its way out with no warning. We were doing worksheets, so class was super quiet until that moment. By now, I'm sure everyone else has forgotten, but I haven't. When I inadvertently spit on the monitor when I'm explaining something to someone. Second date with my now wife. I was cooking dinner for her. Had a little gas pressure I thought I could release quietly. I was wrong. It wasn't horrible and didn't really smell, but still, letting one rip on our second date was not in the plans for the evening. I simply shrugged, looked at her and said, "Oh wow, it's way too early in this relationship for that. I'm so sorry." She laughed and shrugged it off. We've been together almost 15 years. When I was 12, my best friend and I were hanging out in front of my apartment complex on the front steps with 2 guys that we were super interested in. I was sitting on the top step with my bestie, and the 2 guys were goofing off further down the steps and making us laugh. Well, I started laughing so hard, in fact, that during one of those laughs where you're laughing so hard you're no longer making any noise, where you've basically lost control of it and can't stop, I started farting really loudly. Even though I was mortified, I could not stop laughing and laughed harder, and then I started pissing my pants. I couldn't stop. The piss was running down the steps as I tried desperately to stop laughing by covering my ears and shutting my eyes. I finally gained control of my body and stopped laughing, but it was too late. My crush came over to sit next to me, and right before he sat down next to me, he saw the puddle of piss and jumped up alarmedly and said, "Whoa." I got up and tried to run inside, but I didn't have my key, so I had to ring the buzzer and had to wait for my mom to buzz me in front of them with piss-soaked pants and the giant puddle of my piss that had run down half the steps. I stayed inside the rest of the day, and that night my crush miraculously came back and asked me out through my bedroom window.